Many people assume that the background isn't as important as the main subject. And in some respects, they're correct because the main subject is where your attention goes. But it's kind of wrong to assume that the background should be so mundane that it doesn't do anything. And it's also a misconception that because it's the background, you just deal with it fast and then you're done. So here's what I want you to think about when you're doing your background. I want you to think about it as being almost as important as your subject. So you can see what I'm doing right here. I'm using Vine Charcoal, but you can do this with like a 2B pencil. I'm taking a diagonal hatch and I'm keeping my stroke all one way, so my mark all one way, and it's a slight, like I said, angle or pitch to it. And I'm kind of doubling back over my lines, trying to make sure that I'm filling in the gaps, that there are no major gaps in between my shading. And what I'm doing here is I'm creating a tone. So just like you did the tone on the eye sockets and the nasal cavity and other places on the skull, you're going to do a tone with the background. And I do think it's important to pay attention to the direction of your pencil stroke. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up so you don't have to see it in real time. So right now what you're seeing is a little bit faster than in real life. And again, you can see that I'm trying to keep the direction, the stroke, mostly the same. You want to be careful because you can pick up any like indentation if there's anything underneath your paper. So I'm going to be scooting my paper around to make sure that I don't accidentally get any texture from my board or any place else. Because you want the background to, at this stage, be kind of uniform. You want the stroke to be the same way. You want the pressure to be a similar pressure for the time being. And then we're going to make some adjustments. One thing that I noticed when doing my background is I had a couple of areas that needed correcting. And I could kind of, because I'm filling in essentially open space, negative space, I was able to see a few areas that needed to be tweaked or corrected. You might find that's true of yours as well. Now, because I'm using the Vine Charcoal, I want to actually blur that or blend it in. You don't have to do that necessarily for pencil work, but you could, because you can get a nice similar effect with pencil, with taking your blending stump. But in this case, because it's such a large area that you're trying to blend, I would opt for a paper towel. I just have a nice soft paper towel that I have wrapped around my finger, and of course it's wrapped around my finger so that my finger doesn't get all charcoal dust all over it. Today we aren't going to fully finish the background, we're just going to get a good start on it. Just like with painting, drawing is kind of also about layering and building things up. So it's not like instant gratification unless you're doing like a quick sketch or a study. You have to have some patience with this. And just realize like there is going to be an end result and it can be very successful. So again, I'm going in with my pencil. I'm using a 4B there, but I will switch over to a 6B later on. And I'm trying to go with that same direction, that same hatch stroke as when I was using the Vine Charcoal. So this for me is a little bit more permanent, and I'm not intending to blend it, so it's important that I get it looking pretty smooth at this stage, that I don't have any holes in my shading or gaps. What I mean by holes is you don't want any openings. I don't want it to look like Swiss cheese. I want it to be filled in fairly consistently. And of course I can adjust, and that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get down the major notes, and then I'm going to adjust as I go. I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but we talked a little bit about how to do a background when we were doing the dessert drawings. And one thing that a lot of artists do is this tactic, and it doesn't quite follow faithfully like what happens in real life, but it is very effective. And you'll see portrait artists do this all the time. For the background, they'll switch up the light patterns. So if the light side of the face is on the right, as it is in this case, then the dark side will be right next to the light side. And that is to help build up contrast so that the face becomes the focal area, or the lighter side of the face does. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm actually, even though the light's coming from the right side here, I'm making that background darker on the right and a little bit lighter on the left. And again, it's to help pop the form. It's a device. One thing that you should think about when you're doing this is try not to think about it all as one shade of gray. There's multiple values in here. It's hard to see, but on that upper left corner right above where the cranium is, I'm going to make that a little bit darker too. So it's not all the same value to the left and then maybe a different value to the right. There's some areas where the value shifts slightly. And my plan is to go pretty dark near that upper right corner where the cranium is, and then transition to a tiny bit lighter near the eye socket, and then go a little bit darker as it drifts down towards the jaw and spinal column there. So I'm creating kind of like these gradients within there, and that effect is more closer, true to life. And again, I want to think about volume, trying to pop the form. The background really gives an area or an environment for the skull to occupy. That's why I'm including it. You can tell that the photograph I'm using, really there is no background. It's pretty white or blank. It's very sterile looking. But by adding the background, it'll give that skull, again, kind of a place to occupy. And it will help the drawing because it'll heighten the contrast of light and dark. Create a little bit of drama. I'm looking for about 20 minutes worth of work from you. So this is about where you should stop, and that way you'll be ready for next lesson.